What are your common, especially one-shot ways of heightening the situation as players take time to deliberate, e.g. Alone in the Deep, and why 14, Epsilon 14? Yeah, great question. I think this is something that we've spoken out about a little bit. And I guess this is the idea of like, I guess one aspect of this is like pacing. So heightening the situation isn't like bringing up the tension as well as, and then, yeah, heightening the tension as one aspect and then like pacing, trying to like get through the adventure as well. So heightening the situation if players take time to deliberate. There are kind of two things, is ways that I've seen it where like the warden or a GM or DM or whatever, like they have like some sort of visual cue for you where they're like saying, okay, you're taking your time and you're like, yeah, you guys are mucking around here. So ways that I've seen this is that I've heard of people using like a sand timer, like a minute sand timer, just to like give the visual cue. It's just like, okay, you guys are going to make a decision here because you guys are doing a lot of talking, but this whole conversation, you might not have time for this. So I've seen visual cues like the timer. I've seen in one of the games, Waco Matrixo, who I played in one of his games, he like lit a match. And so he just showed it to the camera and we just watched this match getting, closer and closer to his fingers. So that's like a visual cue for people to like hurry up. And then another aspect is Sam, who's in the chat here. Sam, he has like, as part of his campaign, he has these extra, I guess, like, I don't want to say admin roles, but extra roles that each player has that is not necessarily about their character, but as players to ensure that the game keeps going and helps with any administration stuff between games. But one of them, and also he says that they rotate around. So please correct me, Sam, if I just right. But one of them is called the quartermaster, and that quartermaster is someone who, it is their role that during a game, whenever there's some sort of decision to be made and the situation is being given by the warden himself in this situation, is that there is that quartermaster, their role is to go, all right, what is our consensus here as a party? We've talked about this for a little while. We seem to have a couple of ideas, but what we're going to do. And that quartermaster player role is that they're going to say, okay, well, what are we going to do? And then they feed that back to the warden. So there's that aspect of like, okay, here's someone else, a caller. Thank you. Yeah, I think you do have a quartermaster in there as well, I think, if I remember correctly. So this caller person is that they are, they're responsible for going, all right, we've made a decision. This is what the party is going to do, and trying to like wrap that up a little bit. So there's those aspects of like, okay, here's where you can kind of mitigate or kind of create some sort of way of limiting the amount of deliberation that's going on. Yeah, that's right. Quartermaster manages items. That's right. So those are two aspects that you can do to like minimize deliberation and just chatting about, oh, well, we could do this or that, or this or that. In terms of heightening teaching, I think there are some aspects that depend on the module itself. So if I think about Epsilon 14, what I personally did for Epsilon 14, especially if they are like exploring around and like looking around the base. So I always forget what room names are in these different places, but what I ended up doing is that I had a bit of a script or playbook about like who goes where when in terms of some of the NPCs. So they're not all just in the bunks and they're not all in the workspace and they're not all in the mess at given time. They are split up at the start, And the starting premise for when the people arrive on Epsilon 14 is that they are doing like a shift change. Like it's kind of like the start of the morning shift. Mike is not come from his overnight shift. I said that this is kind of unusual, but not completely unusual. So they haven't sort of like gone, oh God, we've got to find him. But now they're starting to get to that point like, okay, well, we got to figure out where he is and check on him. So at the start of I thought, okay, well, it's at the start of the shift. What are people doing? So Sonia is in the workspace because she's there to greet the characters. Then there's Rose, who's at the elevator. A couple of people are like putting on their suits. There are people at bunks. There's people in the mess and there's people in the washrooms. And by spreading these people out, that gives me the opportunity to like kill one of them off, basically. And then one of the other NPCs or the PCs is that they go into that room and they discover that person has been killed. If there's a lot of deliberation, like say if they're just stuck in the workspace, they're not really doing anything. They're like, oh, we got to wait for this like thing to get fixed and get down the elevator or whatever, is that you can get one of the other NPCs that were in a different room to go into that room and then communicate back like, oh, you might want to check this out. There's someone's been, has disappeared and there's blood on the walls and stuff like this. So I think that's a good thing to keep track of is go, okay, what are my opportunities to interrupt their deliberation somehow? So that's an example for Epsilon 14. With Alone in the Deep, I've never run it, but my understanding is that you're in like a submarine and there's also multiple spaces. So I wonder if you can do something similar with Alone in the Deep. Let me just check if that's the one that I'm talking about. Because I have printed it out and I can't find it. That's not it. No, that's not it either. I can't find it. But yeah, is that if you know that the crew or NPC is going to be spread out, then reporting back that one of them has died or one of them is like reported weird, then that's always a way that you can interrupt that deliberation. Going back to another way that you can do it from a gaming point of view is like remind people how much time they've got left. Like if you have like a real time timer, then that will help, is that they know that they can't deliberate for a long time because in hours this thing's going to blow up. Yep. Yeah, exactly. So like ramping up, what are these? And like, that's another thing. Like I've mentioned about like NPCs going missing, but if there's like environmental effects that happen to, in this case, the submarine, then having crew report back on that, then that's always good. I know in some modules, there's like an AI communicating with the party, like warning them about things. So, and that's always a good way to like interrupt the deliberation, is that there's some warning over the comms or over the loudspeaker or whatever. And then, okay, like, are you guys going to react to that? Like this, you got to hurry up and do something here. So yeah, you got me thinking about that. Yes, man, about, okay, what can people do to like push people along a little bit? And I think when they're deliberating for a long time, you've always got to just think about, okay, well, what are some external factors to the party that I can go, right, this happens, and which is either pushing the stakes up or putting them in danger or giving them like a new like sub-objective, like in terms of finding a dead NPC. Oh, we're going to check it out. What happened to them? In terms of some environmental effect, like, warnings blaring for low oxygen or radiation effect or something like this. It's like, oh, well, we've got to go and figure out what this is, because now that might determine where we go. So I think that's something that I'll probably keep in mind, actually, is to go, okay, what are some things that I can interrupt people with? And that might be, in other cases, it might be, interrupting them with like a random encounter per se. Yeah. Like if I think about like Moon-based blues, they have like weird enemies and they are this is kind of an unusual case. In Moon-Based Blues, things are pretty chilled at first, and people like NPCs are walking around. The NPCs are weird. So if you can just say, oh, an NPC walks in and it's like they have this weird appearance, and they're probably not going to deliberate after that. So yeah, hopefully I've given you some ideas there. Some which are limiting the deliberation and time, not time wasting, but that deliberation and like using up a lot of time, which are giving them some sort of visual clue that they're stalling. Then there's okay, well, maybe a module has like a natural time limit. Yeah, there's always going to be just reminding them of their urgency. And then there's like external stuff to the party, but in game. So environmental effects or an NPC saying, hey, something happened. Let's change the situation a little bit, even if it doesn't change it that much. But yeah, I think that's probably enough. And then one thing is just stopping them deliberating. And then the other thing is heightening the game and the session itself. Cool. Peter says, Epsilon 14 mentioned, I always think games prompting quests. You should check that out. Check out that vent. You should check out the show. Yeah. I think people are, especially in Mothership, they're always conservative about checking vents. Naturally so. But yeah, checking out other rooms and things like that. People will eventually get there. However, of course, people can like deliberate about like, oh, should we go here or here? And it takes a long time. Whereas if you have this interruption, this in-game interruption from an NPC or some sort of environmental effect, then I think that gives them a little bit more urgency and pushes them ahead. I wasn't sure if I should actually be like the sub hits the ocean floor in 15 minutes real time. And if it does, okay, what else happens? I think with just an extra note on the real time timers is that be a little bit generous about that. Like if they ask you a question sort of above table, or if they have a break or whatever, then of course, like pause that timer. So I tend to be a little bit lenient on the real time timer, is that if we're not actually like in game, then okay, we can pause it. But yeah, if they're deliberating, then, you can, in some cases you might find that, I know with Akigata, that module is that every 30 minutes there's an announcement or some sort of, there's like a signal thing. And then so as a result, every 30 minutes the players are getting reminded that their time is ticking down. Strand says, I don't like to do it, but there's no shame in going out game, like, above board, above table, I guess, for a quick second. So, yeah, to hurry the hell up. Yeah, I guess that might be, it depends on the group. I think if it's a very new group, then you might want to do this a little bit more, especially if you've like given them a few cues that they should hurry up and it's like, and they're still not doing it, then yeah, I think that's worthy of doing. If the party isn't doing that and you know them well, then yeah, sorry, Raphael. I didn't mean you to join on this like beautiful picture. Where was I going with that? Yeah, if it's like, a group that you've played with a lot, then, you can just kill them off really. Like, they've like created their own problem with that. So yeah. Cool. Great question, Eslan. That's awesome. Okay. So, got a few things on the agenda, a little bit shorter in terms of like news and releases this week. We had a couple of interesting ones that kind of like new, which is cool. So, the very first thing is this one here, which is Flatline, and this is something that made by Xiaofang, and the same person who made a module for Prospero's Dream about a sketchy like bao bun restaurant, and that's Xiaolong Bao. And this was made as part of like another jam that is on Itch. So there are lots of these like gaming jams, and often they are rules agnostic as well. So it doesn't matter for what. And so for this particular adventure, I thought it was really a really cool idea. And so to give you the premise, you died, and that's just the beginning. Your last job went wrong, everybody died, and then you woke up. The afterlife is a white-walled room with some suit who says he's an angel, here to judge your sins. Is this heaven, hell, or something worse? One thing's for sure, in this galaxy, nobody rests in peace. So Flatline is a trifold sci-fi horror mystery scenario for Mothership. In Flatline, players start the adventure dead and discover the truth behind their resurrection. Flatline can be played as a one-shot mystery or as a continuation of a campaign after a TPK, Total Party Kill. Plus, there are some unique mechanics for playing as a cyber ghost, a layered mystery, NPCs with conflicting agendas, always cool, and new tech for dealing with the undead. And so they talk about what is included in here. So most of this, I believe, was done within the jam. So as in within the time for submission. And there's a couple of like public domain images, but everything else, writing and art, was by Benjamin Xiaofang Hurley. So let's take a look at some of these images here. So a great sort of like cyber hologram coming out of like a CRT monitor. These are some images of the brochure itself. So you have that image from there. And as I mentioned, it's a trifold. And then it has this table, which I'll see if I can make this a little bit bigger. No, the zoom is a little bit weird. That's better. Okay. So it has some information about being a cyber ghost. So invisible to mortals, you have flight, phase through matter, and physical attacks, no bodily needs, and you have some sort of cyber ghost abilities. Cons, no equipment, can't move heavy objects, can't hold more than one object, and can't leave your haunt. So you've got some different classes. So if you're an android, you are in the machine. So intellect checks and your ability, you control a machine or android for 1d. That's kind of cool. Okay, so I'm not too sure how this, like, if you're an android, hold on. 2 cyber ghost abilities, right? And I'm guessing these there. Oh, okay, right. So does that mean, like, if I'm an android and I died to bleeding, then I have this ability and this ability, I guess is how that works. Yeah, okay. So as an android, into the machine, Marine Banshee Whale. So it's an actual attack on a living being, ignoring armor. Scientist, possession. Intellect check, control a creature for 1d5 rounds. Okay, very nice. Teamster, poltergeist. Strength or speed check, move heavy object. So I guess you can move something around, like move a table or something, just to freak people out. So it also talks about how you died. So if you die by blunt force, you have mind haze. Give a living total amnesia for 5 minutes. Okay, so a bit of like loss, like character agency loss there. And also it takes 5 minutes to recharge. So obviously you can't just walk around doing this all the time. Bleeding, ectoplasm, produce an impossibly strong adhesive. Okay, nice. Okay, so just like throw some glue on the ground or make it, what else could you do with that? Oh, like sticking people to the floor and stuff like that. Immobilizing people, I imagine. Gunshot, projection, teleport to a spot you can see, even via camera and mirror. Ooh, that's pretty nice. That is creepy as... I haven't got to that. Fire and explosives. So ghost fire, ignite something or someone. 1d5 damage per round. Okay, so it kind of makes me think of like flames that you cannot see. Gore massive. Apparition. Manifest horrifically. All close, fair save or flee. Nice. Okay, so you come back with some like horrifically damaged version of yourself. Yeah. It kind of reminds me of, what is that movie called? Oh, like The Frighteners. The Frighteners by a Peter Jackson film. And it's just like these people who, well, I guess it's in most films with ghosts, especially if there's been some sort of like, they've died in a particular way, then that you see that sort of thing. Tips for Wardens. PCs discover their abilities through experimentation/will. E.g., the first time a scientist tries to influence an NPC, they might spontaneously use possession. Don't be stingy with clues. It's no fun if they never use their powers. Okay, so they discover their abilities, know these from the start. Oh, that's interesting. I wonder how you get to the stage where you can create the situation like, okay, here's the room, and, they figure out that they can actually do something about it. Yeah, that's really cool. I like this concept. It's very, very cool. Hey, g'day. So how are you doing? Like the scene in Beetlejuice where they morph their bodies. Yeah, exactly right. Power discovery is tough for a one-shot. Yes, I think that would be really tricky. I wonder, of course, like I can't see what the rest of the trifold is like, but I wonder whether there are ways that you can create situations and the environment lends itself towards interacting with it, or at least attempting to interact with it. And whether there's also ways of like accidentally interacting with the environment, like, oh, I try and walk through this table, and it's like you realize that you kind of like nudge the table or something like this. Strand. Imagine someone sees you and is scared of your horrific visage and ask how you died, and it was just a stroke. And that's just how you look. Yeah. Wait, what are you talking about? It's like, I didn't die from gore or massive injuries. This is how I looked when I was alive as well. Yeah, exactly. But yeah, really like unique idea and kind of cool to think about. Okay, if we do have a total party kill, how can we still play with these characters for another session? And what is one version of the afterlife in Mothership look like as well? So I really like that. It's a great idea. And yeah. So I guess my understanding is it's some sort of, it looks like some sort of like facility, and you don't know if you're really in limbo or not. And I guess you also find out that you can't interact with other people who might be like, who are not dead. So yeah, that looks like a lot of fun, to be quite honest. It's really, really cool. I would love to see like how this played. It could be really, really fun. And I'm curious about how, like, what does the end of this look like? Like, is it sort of that you are in limbo and then like you being in this limbo between the real world and the afterlife? Like, does that get resolved or something like this? Yeah, the recycling of a dead character is quite fun, I think. Yeah, characters for the party, yeah. I think that would be a lot of fun just to try and do something more with them, because, of course, especially in one-shots or even in the campaign, is that, I don't know about you, but for the groups that I've played in, is that you tend to there's this temptation to also take this character on this other one-shot as well. Even if it doesn't make, much sense and there's no like timeline or anything. It's just like, oh, I quite like playing this character. Then, this is one way of, pushing that to another session, even though they died. So yeah, really cool content. Like I said, this was part of a jam, a submission, and this was, I think, done last month or something like this. And this was part of this house horror jam. And this is where like the sort of the seed for the idea came from. And yeah, so yeah, this is kind of cool. It's not a ranked jam. There is no winner as well. So I guess it's kind of forcing you to think of new ideas and create something. And that's the main idea. Jam. So on itch, and I guess in some other contexts, like I think it's like in coding as well, is that you'll have a jam, and in this situation is that for a temporary amount of time. So in this case, it's probably so this went for like 2 months, this particular case, but you have this period where you want to create something, in this case, where it's creating something for a TTRPG, and it's usually themed. So in this case, it's this house horror theme. So you can find these on itch. Like there's even like a dedicated part of the website just looking at jams. Some of them are TTRPG system specific, some are not. Some go for a long time, some go for a short time. The general idea is that here is a set period of time for you to create something new. And some of them, they mention that they are like, here it says it's not ranked and there is no winner or anything like this. And then there's some other ones where there's like community voting on, okay, what did you think of the art and what did you think of the layout? What did you think of the story and things like this? And then there is a little bit of like judging. So what else? And then in terms of other types of jams that are similar to this is like a coding jam, which is more like a hackathon, I guess, where for a short period of time, you have a theme just like this, and then you'll create like an application or some sort of software or something like this. And that you might also hear that as like a code jam, although not as common as like a hackathon. So I hope that answers your question, Strand. But yeah, it was kind of cool. And so I urge you to just like have a quick look if you're interested at some of the other jams. There's tons of them going on, and more often than not, they are for people to collaborate with people, and you want to just throw some ideas out there, and especially with one that like not judged, there's like very little pressure about creating something of like amazing quality, but it does sort of get you to stretch yourself to try and do some things. So it's a good opportunity, and basically it just gives you a bit of a deadline really, and also some creativity around the theme. Okay, so what else did I have on here? No, all good, Strand. No problem with the explanation. I'm happy to. And another one that I saw on the Mothership Discord in the promotions one was this one here, which is Vortex Mountains. And this is by, where was the name here? Nadia Sharova. So I haven't seen if this person has done other Mothership stuff. I couldn't find anything, but I thought this concept was really cool. So the description here, the planet looked empty from orbit. Your crew has landed to establish a research station on a magnetically anomalous world. Routine survey work to support the real science in space. But the compass readings are wrong. The monitoring data doesn't add up, and something in the Vortex Mountains has been watching you since the moment you touched down. Vortex Mountains is a first contact mystery pamphlet for Mothership. One session, 2 to 4 crew, and no combat required. So that's kind of interesting how it's more like purely exploration and just like, okay, here's some weird stuff. The planet's spiral mountains are formed by geomagnetic vortices, and they are inhabited structures that have been slowly building for millions of years. Inhabited by something no human expedition has encountered before, the crew arrived to study the planet. The planet has its own agenda. Of course, it's Mothership. So it talks about, the world, talks about different locations, has some different creatures and some different tables, some notes, and some cover art and map. So I think Nadia did this as well. And then, so tone, mystery, not horror. I think this is, to get a good vibe for this one, is this particular sentence here. The danger is the weight of being watched by something that doesn't yet know what you are, and vice versa. This pamphlet ends at the threshold. What this crew discovers and what happens next is up to them. So I'm not too sure whether that is sort of inviting improvisation of like, okay, well, here's a setting, here are some things that are going on, here are some other entity and creatures that are here. But what happens with the crew and what they do, and also how the planet plus these creatures react, is kind of like more improvised here. So yeah, I'd be interested to know how this would play. But it was curious, and I love, this idea of a vortex mountain. I thought that was really, really kind of cute, really cool, really interesting. So yeah, cool. All right. What else did we have on here? So we've got a sale that's going on with Joshua Justice, and a lot of it is with a set of some of his published items related to this Hekate sector. I'm not too sure if anyone has played any of these or actually like read a lot of them. Personally, I haven't. I've only sort of seen them around, but I've never taken like a good look at them. So these are all on sale, and so I would encourage you to check it out and see if it's your thing. And that's the sale ends in a few days as well. So if you do a bit of a search for Joshua Justice, you'll be able to find these, or you can find like Hekate, which appears in a lot of these. Yeah. And then the other reminder that I had was that, well, one of the reminders, I should say. So Dying Hard on Hardlight Station, this Kickstarter is finishing in 5 hours. There we go. So this is very close to finishing. If you had a look at it, I would encourage you to. This is a really, really awesome set of adventures that are all within the same universe. And the Dying Hard on Hardlight Station was originally published a while back. And this is really like broadening out that universe and connecting it up with other parts of what David Kenny has released, or Magnum Galaxy Games. And there's also a preview. So if you would like to, there is a preview available here. So on this Kickstarter page, there is a 48-page preview PDF. So you can get an idea of what this looks like. And my understanding is that it would be, did I read somewhere there's, 200, like a 200-page or more multi-sector campaign setting, 10 original adventures, and spiraling out from the station, this Hardlight station that is mentioned in the title, where your crew will explore haunted derelicts, abandoned research sites, and planets gone to seed. Yeah, so very much in this corporate horror, paranormal threats, and deep space terror. And a great campaign setting, I imagine. And if you haven't checked it out, I would encourage you to. Yeah, looks like Fusili is one of the backers. So we'll find out, at some point in the future about what this really looks like. So just a reminder for that one. And then I'm not too sure if everyone else had like done Mothership Month 2025. So last year there was Mothership Month, and a lot of the emails for backers went out last week. So if you haven't come across your email, then either keep your eyes peeled for it or try to find it. I know that they did it in a bit of like a stepped process. They sent out a few and then they sent out the rest. And I got mine last Friday, if I remember correctly. So yeah, so it's just like confirming the things that you bought. If you want any add-ons, which there are like tons, so many add-ons to that thing. And then of course, like confirming your address and things like that. So yeah, just a reminder for that. So a bit about the community. So if you don't already know, we have a campaign at length Discord community. So there is a link in the description below. We had our weekly community meetup. So there was 4 of us, which included Sam, included Ernie. I always forget how to pronounce your name on here. Niuna Gaming. And we had Matu as well from Green Moon Games. So we had a good chat. It was really cool to meet each other. It was probably less mod, than the previous one, but it was great to meet each other and say hello and share our experiences. And of course, with Matu publishing some things recently. So publishing and organizing physical copies of his games as well. So yeah. And then a reminder about our demographics. So a few weeks back, I put together a quick chart on the demographics of the community. So it has grown. So I think when we did this last time, there were 24 people and now there are 33 people. So a few add-ons, a few additions to the community. And you can see that with an extra Crashlander, an extra corporate inspector. I'm so surprised that so many people are corporate inspectors, to be quite honest. A few dogs of war. So the population of dogs of war has increased. And then a few more explorers, the same amount of off-world colonists, I think that is. No hyperspace raiders, no private mercenaries, a couple of extra salvages, and the space truckers have a tight-knit group, so there's no more. The amount of inspectors is still suspicious. I love being watched and judged. Well, I'm not too sure if I love being watched and judged, but I think I know that I've played in games where people are like these corporate inspectors, and that can be quite a fun crew to be a part of. And I find it quite easy to roleplay that, this, I know in one of our groups, I think is in it. And yeah, very easy to sort of like pretend that you've got like the clipboard and you're like, oh, well, this is not, up to, corporate policy or whatever. So that's always quite a fun thing to roleplay and eat roleplay, especially as you're exploring the start of an adventure. You can imagine going into another bug hunt and seeing all like the holes in the roof and the plant life and stuff like this. So yeah. Cool. All right. So I wanted to just, connect back with the community and just seeing how it's going. A little bit quieter this week, but hopefully we'll get that up and running a little bit more. And had some really nice messages, by the way. So thank you I had some questions about the agenda for these streams and got some really nice feedback. So I appreciate that. As you guys are the best people to ask. So I figured, why not? All right. So the main topic that I had for today was talking about like vague, especially pamphlet modules, and I'm sure this applies to like larger modules as well. And thinking about how you can mold them how to mold them for your session. What do I mean mold? So really, you can figure out like how much you want to adapt and how much you want to take from it. Whether it's like, okay, in many cases, there's always like a really great like teach-in and mid-game, like when the characters are, figured out what is going on and they've got their objectives. I think in most modules that is well written and that's very easy to play out. However, where it gets vague is often at the start and the finish. And so that's what I wanted to sort of talk about a little bit today, and also talk about some of the modules we've already talked about as well. So The things that I find that I need personally when I'm like trying to run something is, what are the objectives of the players and do they make sense? And second, how do they get there and how can they leave that situation? You know, if it's a derelict ship, how do they get to the ship and how do they leave the ship? If it's a place within a station, how did they get to that particular place and how did they leave? If it's on a planet in a city or something, how did they get there? How do they come back? And also why? So I think one of the key things is around the objectives. So the objectives are so incredibly important. So the reasons why objectives are so incredibly important is this drives what the players do. And if you don't have a good set of objectives, then there are some things that can happen which are like, they don't stick around. Like, why should we stick around? And a really good example of that is if you a haunting of the haunting of Epsilon 14, like without any extra objectives, because I think the original objectives are not enough. And it's only if you completely explore everywhere within the base and the mines that then the story like comes and unravels a little bit. And sometimes there's not really like a nudge towards some of those aspects. So as far as I know, in the objectives of Haunting for the Haunting of Epsilon 14, there's no objective related to Dr. Giovanni's ship. The only sort of nods towards something weird going on is if you talk to Sonia, of course, and I believe in the pamphlet it talks about that she will mention about Giovanni. When was the last time she saw him? What was he doing? And the only other aspect or evidence that Giovanni is doing something a bit weird is if you do go down to the mines and there is like a work desk and there's like a code on it, and that code, helps you get into the ship. So I think there are aspects where like that sort of stuff can be like nudged a little bit more towards the players and go, okay, well, instead of giving you absolutely nothing, is that I generally recommend that there is something that you have to do with Giovanni. It can be still vague, like you don't have to be like find the yellow goo or anything, but it's more like is that you're picking up supplies, but you're also picking up like evidence of his work, whether that be like reports, documentation, or samples. And you can word that in a way that's vague, but also means that the players know that they have to figure out how to get in there. How do they interact with him? Because if the objectives are as written, as that more often than not, people are just trying to interact with Mike. So they have to go down to the mines, they have to figure out where he is. And then they are getting like a load of mining material. And so they just have to wait a little while. So, and even the objective of like going to find Mike isn't really their job either. It's just like, oh, well, this kind of like weird thing happened. We don't know where he is. And it's like, if you are the crew turning up to the situation, like, well, why do I care? Like, there's no point in me, like, it's not my responsibility to find out who this guy is. I don't know him. I don't work here. I don't work at the base. So there's not really a lot of things that are like pulling you into the map. Like, I'm pretty sure there's probably been some awkward sessions where it's just like people just hanging out in the workspace, just waiting for the things to get loaded. Of course, like I'm taking that to the extreme, but I could definitely see that happening. So what they need to do and making sure, where they need to go to do it as well. So if you think about like the design of like something like Bloom, for example, is that, and I'm sure this is probably the same in lots of other modules, is that for the objective to succeed at it, you have to go to very far into the map. Like you have to go down into the lower floors. You have to go to the, like down the long corridor, to find the thing that you need. And so if you don't have objectives to do that, like how are you like encountering things along the way? How are you encountering creatures? Because if you just stay in one room, like all those creatures have to come to you. Of course, that's like the extreme. And thinking about like what's stopping them from just turning around. So I think what to do in that situation, if it doesn't really feel like complete to you, where you can think about, okay, well, why would someone do that? And what's like an easy way out of that? You can find other you can find other objectives. So on the subreddit or on the Mothership Discord, there's always tons of ideas around like how you can, add extra objectives for the crew for most of the very popular modules and adventures. I think other aspects would be doing something like secret agendas. So you could have these objectives as something extra. No worries, all good. Thanks for coming along. Yeah, you can always add extra like secret agendas, and then that sort of makes people go. It might not be that if like one person knows that they need to go and find a particular thing, and then there's like some sort of increased tension within the group, but it also forces them like not to leave without this person unless, some circumstances, right, where like they come across a creature or whatever. So that's another way. So a crew objective, a secret agenda or secret objective is another one. What else can you do here? I think those are the main two, really. Oh, and also making like some connections. Like, of course, with a one shot, this is a little bit tricky. But if you are able to say that, okay, for Hunting of Epsilon 14, Mike or Cal is an engineer, so maybe that's in the party knows Mike somehow, and just giving like a little bit of a thread of relationship can get people to go a little bit further rather than going, especially if they are like really keen to role play those things, then often people will go to extra lengths to do those. But if it's just some random guy, it's like, why should I go look for him? So yeah, crew objectives, secret objectives, or creating some sort of connection with NPCs that are in the module or the adventure are great ways that you can get people to do things and go a little bit further than just turning up and turning around. And then I think the thing that's more common, I find, is being a little bit confused about how people get there and how do they leave. So within these things, like if they're turning up, like what is the mission? Are they sent there? Do they wake up there? Do they go there out of curiosity? Is the adventure on their own ship? Is the adventure, somewhere that they're familiar with or not? And so I think that's really important. I find that just knowing and giving some logic about how they got there and also some clues about how they got there is super important. And the example for me here is Moon-Based Blues, where, basically it's insinuated that the crew has crash landed there, but there are some big gaps between, okay, on the map, there is a crashed ship, and the module talks about how the crew wakes up in like a security dome. Like there's like this big gap here of information, like what has happened here. And so for me, I think that's fine for the players to feel this gap. But for me, I just needed to have something that joins these two things together, like just some thread of logic at least. And that thread of logic then would give me some moves that I could place around. So in the case of Moon-based Blues, what I ended up doing was that, yes, they wake up in the dome as the module talks about, but if they do go outside, then they would see some evidence that something or some people have been dragged between, like, around the domes and enters the security dome, with the idea that the ship's android for the crew, after the crash landing, has got people out of cryosleep, but they haven't really like woken up yet, and dragged them around the domes and into the security dome through the airlock. And the pilot, whoever was piloting, like, died on impact. And so later, if they do visit the ship, they see that scene, like in the cockpit, like that this is going on, and like they can start joining those dots. And then with the android, is that the story that I came up with is that the android enters into the rest of the domes, like after dragging people in the end, and the module, let's say, it's like one person has their loadout. So once that's been established, is that the android walks in and then has been attacked and has been like stripped for parts, and also because of the mad meteor colonists have like stripped all of like the blue from the android. And so with that story, that closes that gap for me, but also it allows your players, if they do get curious or they're exploring around, is that then they can maybe join those dots back themselves. Yeah. So the start, just getting people from like, why are we there? And then actually being there is not just as simple as just like, oh, you wake up. Like, I really don't like that type of thing. And it's super important for me just to have that logic gap closed. And then second to that is, how do they get out? So I think with how do they get out, I mean, in the Moon-based Blues thing, it's like, okay, well, in the crash ship, you got to figure out how to do that. But with other modules, you might have like a couple of other opportunities as well. I think this is important because otherwise, if people's objectives aren't clear and they can't get out, then it's like, this is not really a game. This is just fluctuation that is terrible. But if they do have good objectives and they can see how they might be able to get out at least, then that provides a bit more of like a mechanism of a game. And therefore that pushes them through the module and the adventure. So how do they get out? So often it's just like just leaving the location. If it's on a station, going back to their ship, stealing another ship, or waiting for pickup. And what to do when this doesn't feel complete. I think at the very least, if there's no clear way of getting out, is that most crews or most parties will have a way or have someone to contact. If you haven't already established it, is that, okay, maybe there is a way that they can communicate and get picked up later at the very least. I think that's always a bit of a fallback option. It's not the greatest. What else? What other options would you have? I mean, you have like, if you're on a ship or whatever, there's like, escape pods and things like that as well. That is another option. But yeah, it just depends on the module a little bit. But making that clear to them, and also their expectations of that is important. So if you are on a ship, there's probably escape pods. If it's a really huge ship, have a hangar for smaller ships. So then there's maybe a ship in there. So having some like expectations that people can go, okay, well, this is not just like an escape room with no escape. There is some sort of like ways of resolving this. And it might even be like we take over the ship, we commandeer it and we end up with it. So yeah, so those are some ideas that I had around like vague modules. And I'm curious to know how whether other people have a bit of a framework for how they approach a module, because for me, those are the three things that are really important. Is, do the objectives make sense? How did they get there? And how do they get out of the situation? Having those three things are super important. And most modules have everything that's kind of in between. They mostly have good objectives first. And then second, they have, okay, well, what are the encounters and what's the storyline in between? What is that sort of like mid-game? What are those mid-game mechanics? Like if you every time you walk into the room, you roll something and some random encounter happens, and that could be part of it, or it could be some sort of like trigger points as well that if you go here, this happens. So yeah, I'm curious if anyone has some other ideas around how can people get some clarity when they're running a very vague module. But yeah, I'd be curious to know what people had in that regard. And a couple of things to finish off was I wanted to show people, I think it was Peter or Strand. I go ahead and check. It was I think it was Strand originally. So Strand was asking about going into modules in more detail. And it's something that I haven't done on stream. I think I might have done it earlier, but I haven't done it recently. And that was mainly because if I do it for a pamphlet, it's really hard to just talk about the pamphlet without showing the pamphlet, and the pamphlet's only like 2 pages. So it can be a bit tricky about like, okay, well, I'm just showing the whole thing. And to do that is a bit tricky, I find. And of course, like it's better to ask people about, like, if they're comfortable with me showing that and etc. So yeah. However, for like longer modules, I think that's probably something that is a little bit easier, because it's very hard to show like every single page of that and showing just particular elements of it to talk about it. So that could be an option. However, if you do want some episodes of people talking about particular modules and going into more detail, is that I definitely recommend the Ansible Uplink. And this is a podcast done by Chris Ariu, I've featured some of his things on here before. And each episode is that he talks to someone who is generally like another creator, and they talk about a particular adventure, sci-fi, and I think it's like probably like 60% mothership and 40% other stuff. And each episode they talk about the module from a player's perspective, so no spoilers, and then talk about the module in terms of running it. So like spoilers for basically like Warden notes, and they talk about the art, they talk about the design, they talk about things that are like really interesting concepts for the story. They talk about game mechanics as well. And yeah, it's usually Chris and a guest. So I think it's changed. I'm not too sure if he's had any repeat guests yet. And they've talked about some really cool, I think the episode that I enjoyed the most is the one about, well, 2 of them actually. One of them was about VR Dead, which sounds like a really cool module. And the other one is not a mothership one, which was about, it was like a Star Wars bounty hunters TTRPG or something like this, which was just interesting listening about the history of that particular game. But yeah, I would recommend checking that out. And that is, a link for that is in the description below. And the other thing that I thought that would be kind of cool to show, I think might have talked about it on stream, or at least someone's mentioned it as well, is about hundreds. Talks about essential D100 tables for sci-fi RPGs. And this is by Quadra. So this was the creator of Warped Beyond Recognition, which is a mothership module, a zine, I think, and also Trash, which I believe they were doing like articles about sci-fi TTRPGs at the very least, and also had some mothership specific like articles as well. And if you don't know about hundreds is quite cool, is that it's this kind of, they talk about this experiment, and it's, the concept is that the book will always cost 1 cent per table entry. And so that's $1 per D100 table. And once you've bought it, you also get all the future updates for the digital book for free. And there are also some bonus tables thrown in. So if Rue buys the book at the start, when there are only 4 D100 tables, she pays $4. If Vasilev buys it later, when there are 10 D100 tables, he pays $10, and so on. But by the time Vasilev got the book with 10 tables, Rue got the additional 6 tables in an updated PDF for free. And both of them get the 11th table, every other table after that, for free forever. So it's a really cool concept. I really like this concept of like, okay, it's almost like procedurally generated, is a better way of putting it. It's like iterative in terms of going, okay, here's some interest in these types of tables. It gets popular enough, and then, okay, I'll do a bit more work on it. Then it's valuable, a little bit more valuable, but the people who've already bought it have already kind of like backed the project in a way. And so every so often, as there are more purchases of it, then they add stuff. So you can see, be like, sure, exactly right. So you can see the contents here. They got lots of like contraband, etc. And then they've also got this change log here. So I can't remember what they did. Most recently, it was updated in November. So I'm not too sure if that was a version update or not. But you can see there is currently 800 entries plus 600 bonus entries. And the thing that they added to this version that is part of the D100 tables is this E100 melee weapons. And you can see before that, they did D100 range weapons. So yeah, very, very cool. I think a really cool concept. And to be honest, it would be great if like there was some like other things that were made in this way.